Ottawa starts the day below freezing, while Canada's Prime Minister is landing in Sydney to talk trade and defense. And Canadians in the Middle East are watching flight boards, not just headlines. Later in the brief, the key question: what Canada is really saying and not saying as it resets ties with India. In Ottawa, the cold snap has eased. Today looks mainly cloudy, with temperatures around -4 degrees Celsius, climbing to about 1. And in Senators news, Ottawa is in Edmonton tonight to face the Oilers, with puck drop at 9 p.m. Eastern. The Senators are coming off a 5-2 win over Toronto, helped by a 2-goal night from Drake Batherson. Edmonton's been one of the league's most productive scoring teams, so the early story to watch is whether Ottawa can stay disciplined and keep the game at 5-on-5. Turning now to the bigger picture, where the stakes rise. Canada's primary thread today is trade and security diplomacy, with Prime Minister Mark Carney now in Australia, just after a closely watched trip to India. Carney arrived in Sydney Tuesday midday local time. The point of the visit is to push closer Canada-Australia collaboration on trade and defense. He's expected to meet business leaders in Sydney, then head to Canberra, where he's scheduled to address Australia's Parliament on Thursday. Before that, he's also slated to speak Wednesday at the Lowy Institute, a major foreign policy think tank. A meeting with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is expected later in the week. Here's the key point. Canada is leaning harder into trusted partner trade and defense-linked procurement as it tries to reduce how exposed it is to the United States. A concrete example is already on the books. Last year, Ottawa and Canberra signed an agreement for Canada to buy an Australian over-the-horizon radar system intended for Arctic use. That's not just a purchase. It's a signal that Canada wants more surveillance capability in the north and wants it through allied supply chains. There's also a communications storyline around this trip. Carney hasn't spoken to reporters for several days, and his office cancelled a Monday press conference in India after his meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So, watch for whether this Australia trip brings more direct public answers, especially on the India file. Because the India reset is where the details and the tensions are. Canada and India announced what's being described as a new partnership, including memoranda of understanding and a strategic energy partnership. Officials say they want to conclude a full free trade agreement, a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, by the end of this year, with mid-December timing being floated. They've also set a target to more than double two-way trade to roughly $70 billion annually by 2030. And the headline deal? Saskatchewan-based Cameco has signed a 9-year contract worth $2.6 billion to supply about 22 million pounds of uranium to India starting in 2027 for Indian nuclear reactors. Officials say the trip produced around 10 commercial agreements worth more than $5.5 billion in total. The risk here is political as much as economic. The trade push is happening while Canada's own security agencies and cabinet ministers are not fully aligned, at least publicly, on whether India remains a foreign interference threat in Canada. One senior Canadian official told reporters the government believes India has changed its behavior and is no longer actively conducting interference or transnational repression in Canada. But other signals cut the other way. Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangari said, "There's a lot more work to do." And CSIS has continued to identify India as a key concern. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand also distanced herself from the senior official's phrasing, pointing instead to guardrails. Midway reset, this is why the Australia stop matters. Canada is building a broader trade and security network, but the India reset shows how quickly economics can collide with security assessments and with domestic politics, including pushback from parts of Canada's Sikh community and some MPs. Briefly, on the international situation many Canadians are watching closely, travel warnings are widening as conflict escalates in the Middle East. Global Affairs Canada says more than 85,000 Canadians and permanent residents are registered as being in the region, and it's advising Canadians to avoid all travel to 10 countries there. Airspace closures and disruptions are leaving some Canadians stuck, with no clear timeline on when normal flights resume. The conflict has also pushed oil prices higher, and forecasters are warning of a bump at the gas pump in places like Ottawa. And one more Ottawa-oriented federal note: Parliament is temporarily without its budget watchdog. Interim Parliamentary Budget Officer Jason Jacques' term has expired, and no successor has been appointed yet. The office can continue working on existing requests under senior leadership, but it can't take new requests or publish new reports until a permanent PBO is named, at a moment when fiscal scrutiny tends to be in high demand. Now, the final piece to watch. Over the next couple of days, watch for 3 timelines. First, in Australia, Carney's Lowy Institute speech on Wednesday, then his address to Australia's Parliament on Thursday. 2 chances to put clearer language around what trade and defense collaboration actually means. Second, on India, whether the government clarifies its position on interference concerns and how it squares that with the big commercial announcements, including that long-term uranium contract that doesn't start delivering until 2027. And third, for Canadians with ties to the Middle East, flight resumptions, changing travel advisories, and whether the energy price spike looks like a short shock or something that lingers into next week. That's your Daily News Bite for Tuesday.